Oops. So some of this has already been covered or touched on throughout earlier parts of the presentation, but this is just kind of looking at the folder structure that's available within analytics, and different folders give different permissions and so forth. Your two root folders that you're seeing here are my folders and shared folders. My folders, that is your private. I won't go too much because I'm going to go into detail in each one, but that's sort of essentially your private linked to your account. Shared folders is a whole mix of things with a mix of permissions depending on where it is within the subdirectory and so forth. So it looks daunting. If you expand if you expand all of the subfolders, it can look daunting, and you can get kind of lost in the folder's directory structure and so forth. And actually, like when I first started using analytics, I don't think I was approaching it in a systematic way, and I was kind of saving things in different areas, just kind of non-intentionally and so forth. So I'm going to be going into detail in each of these. So there's three to four main ones to know about. Again, my folders is your private one. The one that's in green is essentially the shared. That's where the CTW shared folders are. That's where it's stored, and that's where we're able to kind of like see across the consortium. The blue part, which is called CTW Consortium : and then Trinity College or your name, Wesleyan or Conn College, depending on your library. That's just for your institution. Even though it says CTW Consortium, it's a misleading name. It's just going to, that piece that's in blue is just going to be for your institution. Then the other orange one is support. I'll go to that a little bit later. So my folders, that's the one that's basically, that is your account folder. It's private. No other user has permission to view, edit, delete, so forth, to things in there. So best practices are, when you're starting an analytics report, is essentially to save there, and actually to save often, because we've mentioned before that you may have timeouts. There's been times where I've built a large report and then it times out and I've lost a lot of stuff. So it's good to save frequently. And so the best place to start when you're going to save is into my folders. So it's against your private account. And that's essentially, it's a good way to save it there as you're drafting and building it up. So that way you're not sort of cluttering out other areas of your institution or CTW consortium. When you finalize it, is then you can sort of share it with others, or or when you need some help, share it with others, and they can kind of work on it with you. But this is it's also a good backup. So this is like where you want to essentially save everything you've worked on, because there's no other edit permissions to anyone else. So if you share something in another folder, people can go in and edit it and change it and even delete it. So this is good to always save things here. And that way you have sort of a protected private copy that you can always duplicate and just kind of share out again and work off of that. So I think that's sort of a best practice to put things in there and then to go broader from that point on. So the next one we'll go to is the institution folder. Then again, this is, that's the blue one that we saw earlier. And you're seeing, like, for instance, Trinity College's view. So that's under shared folders, and then essentially just one subfolder down into CTW Consortium school name at that point. Once you save something in your My folders and you're kind of happy with where you're at, or you want to just kind of share with your colleagues just within your library, it's good to you can copy and paste it into one of the folders here. Ex Libris gives you can sort of see, like, there's a default organization of like subject area, dashboards, prompts, reports. There may, each of your schools may sort of have a best practices for how it's organized within that. There may be subfolders. Each school may have sort of their own approach to how they're organizing it. So again, things you place in the CTW Consortium : your school's name, that will not be viewable by anyone in the CTW consortium broadly, just within your school, and not viewable by any other ALMA institution, essentially. So it's a good, if you want to keep things sort of private, like financials, fiscal reports, you can put them in here, share them with your staff in your library, and no one else will have access to that. This is the broadest category. So now this is a little buried again. You probably have seen this during some of the demos where we were kind of digging down to get to like the CT Analytics training report. So this again is under shared folder. So it's kind of a longer subfolder. I kind of put the green kind of files directory there. So it's shared folders, community, then reports, and consortia, and then CTW, and then you could pick your school from within CTW. Now, essentially, anything that's under shared folders, community, and reports, if you don't go in consortia, you'll see institutions, and that's just for colleges, right, or universities that are just not part of a consortia, and just have essentially just their school. So if you're looking for that, so everything here is viewable by all of CTW, but also essentially by all ALMA institutions. Anyone who has an ALMA institution that has an analytics account can get in here and view our reports, can edit them, and even delete them. So again, that's why it's best practice to have a copy saved into my folders, and then to duplicate or just to copy and paste into this broader one. So if there's something we want to share across a consortium, some larger project we're working on, this is a great place to put it. Like if I was to build something I wanted to share with like Joe or Rebecca or something, then I can put it in Trinity under CTW. They can look at it, they can run it, even edit it and so forth. Again, you may not be able to take the report that's in there and work it. It may not work out of the box perfectly for your school, because again, each of the schools have they have different data models and best practices for how they catalog and work with their data and so forth. So again, you may need to fine tune it, sort of like where I was going to show some of the Watkinson special collections reports I built. They were not going to work under, like if Joe went to run it for Common College, that would not work, as we saw. So it would need to be modified so that he could add to change the filters to be more reflective of what their location codes and what their library codes are and things like that. So sometimes they do work out of the box, as we saw with some like the sort of the generic fiscal ones. But you may need to manipulate it a little bit to get it to work for your school. But this is the place to share. And again, this is viewable by essentially anyone that's an ALMA institution. And you can also look at other consortia, other institutions, and see what reports they've been adding to this, and so forth. So the last two, again, these I'm just going to briefly touch on. They're not really relevant to our session today, but one of them is you can see in orange, there's under, again, shared folders, community reports, support. This may not be relevant to everyone, but if you're working with Ex Libris, you have an open support ticket, and you have an analytics report that you built or something like that sort of helps with identifying the problem, you can drop that report into the support folder. Ex Libris support staff can then view that and run it sort of against your database instance. And that's just kind of a way, like, again, this may not be applied to everyone, but if you're working with Ex Libris support, there's cases where you may need to have an analytics report linked to the problem or something to try to resolve it. Just something to know that where it is and where you can put things in there. The other one I'll touch on briefly is the ALMA. Under shared folders ALMA, you'll see I kind of expanded and blew out part of it. There you're going to see a whole bunch of like different subject areas, acquisitions, fulfillment. These are canned reports that Ex Libris built. So you'll find a whole bunch of things that they've already provided for the community, essentially. You can go in there, you can copy out those reports and kind of try to run them against your database instance. Again, it may not work perfectly because Your data model may be different at your school slightly. So again, they may need some tweaking in different cases, but this is, again, we'll probably explore this more in session 2. But this is just something to be aware of, that there's a lot of CAN reports in there across subject areas that you can kind of work off of and look at, and maybe kind of get inspiration from to kind of build some of your own. So it's just something to be aware of. Any questions, I guess, at this point? Feel free to interrupt me as I go on. You did see this in Solar before we were building some of the other reports live. In the top right corner of analytics, you're going to see the save disk. The left one is save, the right one is save as. You want to, sort of as you build your report, especially as you initially build it, you're going to want to save it. And again, the best practice is to pick my folders to make sure that's highlighted, and then you can name it, and then to save a copy, instead of essentially a working copy in your private folder. And that's the best practice. So again, no one has access to it. They can't edit it, delete it, or anything like that. And that's just good to save it there and just to save often. Because again, you may run into timeout issues. So I like to save, every couple of minutes and so forth, just to prevent any loss of data or loss of your work. Now, sharing your report, I think we had a question a little bit earlier about this. If you're looking at your reports in the catalog view, you're going to see the open edit, and then there's the more button next to it. That'll give you a number of options. Now, there's a couple of ways you can share reports. I found this to be a relatively straightforward way. There's other ways of doing it, but if you do more and then you just make a copy of a report from, essentially, like if you just save something that you've been working on in your My folder, you want to share it with your institution and with the consortium, you can do the more, select copy. Then if you want to share it, then you navigate, you go to catalog, and you navigate to where you want to share it again. So again, either at institution level or at the consortium level. In this case, I would just kind of like doing a rundown if we had an active report that people were working on and you wanted to share it, like I just built the class save folder under the CTW consortium. So that, again, everything there is viewable by all of us across the consortium and viewable by essentially all Alma libraries. So you can just make sure you navigate to and select the folder that you want to share your report with, and then under the catalog you'll see the task. There's a little task bar of a number of buttons there. The lower left corner there'll be paste. You can paste it in there, and that'll essentially create a copy of your report into the shared folder. Once it's there, again, like everyone can view it, they can edit it, they can delete it. Anyone has permissions to that folder. So, so let's say you're working on something, you want to work with one of your colleagues, you can share it there, and they can edit a little bit to refine it for their project or something, or they can make a copy themselves into their My folders if they want to do a lot of tweaking, a lot of adjustment to it. And then the last piece I was going to quickly touch on is exporting your report. In the top bar, when you're working on reports, you'll see there's the printer icon. There's a number of icons there. I kind of find it counterintuitive as an icon. There's an up arrow on a page. I think of that more as like an upload or upstream type of thing. But in this case, it actually means exporting. You can see some of the default options there, like PDF, Excel, PowerPoint, Web Archive. Under data, you can expand that out, and you can export a CSV file, a tab delimited file, and I believe a XML file from the data piece. Most people, I'm guessing, are going to be kind of working with Excel, so I just gave a quick example of that, where I just built a very simple report. I formatted it a little bit and exported it. So as you can see, when you export to Excel, in this case, it actually kind of inherits or maintains a lot of the formatting that I did. So I kind of made one column blue and bold. The other column was just green, non-bold. And that actually kind of essentially inherited that and maintained those values when you export to Excel. It may not be one-to-one all the time. You may sort of have some loss of formatting in some cases, depending on how you're exporting it. But it does a relatively good job of exporting what you're seeing in Alma Analytics to the format you're choosing. It does a relatively good job of doing that. And again, like when we were talking about before, if you don't have the duplicate, if you don't ask the columns to duplicate the data and repeat data, once you export it, and if you just, like, for instance, if I just didn't duplicate the main collection here, that would have all just been one large cell value as you export it to Excel. And that, again, can make it a little bit difficult if you're trying to work with your data in Excel and sort it and so forth. So that's why it's good in the analytics, to do things like to do that repeating value piece. That way you get the granular cells within Excel. And it's just a little bit easier to work with once you're outside of Alma Analytics at that point. So that's a really kind of a rough overview of exporting. I hope the graphics were decent enough in terms of showing those different steps. Now, I guess questions on that piece, or anything from. Sure.
So with the copy feature, if you found a canned report that you wanted to play,
yeah,
would you copy from there and then save it into your My folders?
Yeah, I think that's a good approach. You can go into that Alma, those canned reports, and then just instead of open or editing them, you can sort of open edit right there against your data. But I think it's good to sort of copy it there, drop it into like My folder, that your private folder, and then you can sort of work with it from there if you need to adjust it and change it and make any modifications that fit your library's data.
Actually, two ways you could do it. You could just find the report, highlight it, and use the icons to copy and paste, or open the canned report and then do save as and save a copy into your folder.
Yeah.
Either way, just like most things.
Yeah, there's a lot of different approaches to it. I was just kind of showing like one relatively straightforward, but yeah, like Joe said, that's a great way of doing it as well. Yeah, you can always save as at any point with any report you're working on, and just pick whichever folder you want to work with. Probably starting with My folder initially.
I would say just be careful to do that before you're working on it, because you could potentially wreck someone else's report.
That's what I was worried about.
Yeah. You just save as right away and just make sure, oh yeah, it went to my folders, then do your stuff.
Any other questions at this piece or any part of the class up to this point, I guess?
Are brainstorm full?